Started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. Today, we have a really good guest, and alongside of me is my friend Thomas. He was making faces backstage. You all know Thomas. He's been on the show a million times. You probably find me and him having tons of philosophical conversations on YouTube together. Thomas is my go-to man to have these conversations because he's a wealth of knowledge. Oh, I have a video playing in the background. Okay, there we go. Nice. Sorry about that. So today we're going to be talking with Alexander Bard. I think it was last night. We did some research about him, Thomas. We sat together, went over his book, skimmed through everything, and we have some interesting questions.
We do.
Uh,
We have many things that need to be clarified, and I hope to do so in this conversation.
like what? Like what? What's your favorite one, Thomas?
Tribiopoesis.
Tribiopoesis.
Tribo.
Tribo.
Tribio?
I think it's tribo. Tribopoesis. So this is in the book.
Tribopoesis. So poesis is bringing something into existence, right? Emergently, I guess.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we looked up. We saw that's what
Yeah.
that meant. But it's interesting because it seems like he's trying to ground society in like the tribe as opposed to the individual, which
Well,
is
to me, it just means it's socially constructed poesis. So it's the social construct bringing about something.
true. That does make sense.
That's just a
Well,
guess. I don't know, but
Alexander Bard, he's an interesting guy. The more I looked him up, and I think we looked him up, the more interesting he became. He's a musician and a Swedish author, lecturer, musician, TV personality.
oh,
I think
he's
he was even
Swedish.
a judge. He was even a judge on like one of their like idol shows, from what I know, which is
Wow. Okay,
cool.
that is cool.
And I mean, he should be jumping on in like 2 minutes or something. But I thought I'll start early because, I always get
And chit chat.
yeah, we can just chit chat about random nonsense till he comes in. Oh, remember everyone who's watching, I do a Sunday show on the Pangburn main YouTube channel with me, Travis, and John. We're just talking about like politics and current events and stuff like that. You guys should check it out on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's a show we do, so I would love for you guys to come on. And of course, Thomas, when is your Alexander Bard is here, so real quick. And Thomas, when does your show usually air? It's
My show is usually on Saturday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time US. And, we invite people to call in and stuff on my show. But most of the time, it's just academic, rigorous, getting down to the business and the minutia kind of thing. We really tackle the issues. But let's go to our guest. Alexander, how are you, my friend?
How you doing,
I'm very
Alexander?
good. How are you
Good.
doing?
We're doing
Very
great. I want to first thank you because most people come on the show don't send me their books, and you did. And I just want to say that I appreciate that because it gives me something to go off of.
Yeah.
But I just
Yeah,
want, I
sure.
want you to know that this is just like we like to keep it chill, a
Informal.
relaxed conversation,
Yeah, super informal.
super
Well,
informal.
it's also I work in Europe, so obviously a lot of people know who I am over here as a philosopher, but I'm less well known in North America where you guys are based, and I think the courteous thing to do is to send you a book and you can check out the
Yeah.
material.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
hopefully you
What you
go
doing?
online, you discover, okay, this guy's quite the thing over there, the other side of the Atlantic, the old world. So that's why I would love to send you the books. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. But there's a lot of, I think one thing that I've noticed is you use a lot of idiosyncratic language, your own words, your own formulations. Um,
Well,
and
what you do when you do philosophy is basically you do invent new words, but only when you have to. So the problem is if you use a vocabulary which is out there already, it will be terribly misunderstood. And the benefit of using a neologism, to use a brand new word, is basically that you formulate the word. And increasing that with AI coming along, it's just like the etymology of a word, who used it first. It's kind of an authority you can also have with a word. But I tell
Yeah.
you what, we don't use new words for the sake of it. That's pretentiousness, and I hate that. It's
Okay.
just that to give us the clearest possible view when you read the book. That's the point.
Yeah.
okay, so when I first opened the book, one thing that before we get into the book, I really want to talk
May I
about
say
it.
something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I like the idea of I actually definitely agree with you, Alex, on the having to make up new words, because that's how we move along, right? That's how we stand on the shoulders of giants and instantiate these new words and terms in order to explain things that may have not been explained in the past. So like I appreciate that, but it's very difficult sometimes for me to read new terminology and like accept that into my paradigm. So I'm going to really try to open my mind to that.
I could just add that what happens is that when you do philosophy, you discover that certain ideas have not been thought before, or at least haven't been formulated. So I give you an example. John Seneca is not credited with inventing the term imploitation 25 years ago. The reason was just that nobody thought, what would it mean to, instead of having an exploitative idea towards planet Earth, to actually have an imploitative idea, meaning basically if you take somebody, also put it back after you use it, which is the opposite of exploiting something. And nobody really given a word to it. And exploitation is the Latin word that makes perfect sense. It's the opposite of exploitation. Now it's widely used in papers. People are using it in politics. They use it in ecology,
Yeah.
and the fact that it became a meme and the word spread just is it's evidence
Yeah.
that the word was needed in our language.
Yeah. The idea of compatibilism, you know what I mean? That for a while there, that was just a word that was in
Hmm.
philosophy that didn't have really any tie down to a meaning within, determinism
And
into it.
sometimes in philosophy, you decide not to use the word. For example, I never use the word consciousness or unconsciousness because they're
Ah.
both wrong. I use the word subconsciousness all the time because we're constantly subconscious and that's it.
Oh,
And
okay.
so by not using the word, which is negation, in philosophy, you can also say that I never use the word individual because I don't think a single person ever is individual. I use the word individual because we're all many people at once and we're all individuals and we're all basically tribal flock animals or whatever. So I use the word individual in 6 books and suddenly it stands out that you never talk about individualism, do you? No, because actually I don't believe in it. So
Well,
there you
before
go.
we get into the weeds, I want to know what motivates you. What is the reason why you're writing? You do this project. Why do you talk about resentment? Why do you talk about tribes? Why do you do all of this work? What's your goal here at the end of the day? Like,
Oh, it's a personal spiritual journey to begin with, and I was in the music industry for 25 years, which is great when you're young because you can't do philosophy when you're young. You're just imitating the masters and you become embarrassing. You shouldn't write philosophy until at least 40 years old. Hopefully, wait till you're 60 and you're still young and you can write till you're 90 because life experience is essential to do philosophy properly. So I just say that. What motivates me is that I'm an artist fundamentally. I did art originally. I did music for many years, and philosophy is an art form. And I also do practice psychoanalysis, which is not psychology. Psychology is a science, psychoanalysis is an art form. And I love to be an artist, and my art is words, and my
Oh, I
art
love
is
that.
language. And I'm just not a poet, and I'm not really good at writing novels, but I love doing philosophy. It's just the one thing I wake up in the morning, get a cup of coffee, and I just love to dig into it. And the
I
more I can do
agree.
it, the more I love it.
I agree. That was beautiful what you said about the art of it. That psychoanalysis is an art, and the whole psychodynamic tradition is. I mean, it helped us get where we are, of course, but um,
Psychoanalysis is basically philosophy applied on a single human being.
yes, yes,
That's
and
what it
that's what
is.
Jung
Yeah.
and Freud would. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Um,
Can I just get a coffee?
yeah, of course. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Go
Big
ahead, get a
podcast.
go
coffee.
ahead, go
Oh,
ahead,
but
It's
wait,
take
give
your
me a
time.
second. Wait a
we're
second.
informal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, get a coffee. He woke up this
Ask
morning
him.
and didn't get his coffee.
I didn't mean to get you off topic there, Don Don,
It's
but
okay.
please ask him about the individual thing again, calling it individual. Is that what he said?
Individual as opposed to individual. Yeah, let me
Individual.
write a note on that so we'll ask him about it.
Yeah. And then he said something else about I don't use the words conscious and unconscious. Everything is subconscious. Write
Yeah.
that down too.
I'm sponsored by the Colombian legal drug industry. So here's a coffee, right? Uh, and it's also filled with a Swedish innovation called Oatly. Do you have Oatly in America now?
Oat milk, like milk made from
Yeah,
oats.
the Oatly brand. It's a Swedish innovation. Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that, but
like Ikea, it's Swedish. Yeah.
I drink oat milk all the time. I don't know what that other thing is, but
So this is an oat coffee or something, whatever. But
I
Oh,
here you
like it.
go.
okay.
It's
Cheers.
delicious.
Yes.
It's delicious. Yeah, enjoy.
Wonderful to be here. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So you said that you use individual as opposed to individual. Now my question is, why do you do this? Right? You said that because we're all a part of a tribe, we're all part of a social group, but is it not also true that we also have our own individual, private like life? I know the Japanese. I know
You
if
could
I
just take away the word individual. We have our own individual private life. We have the individual is much more useful. The problem is that individualism was invented by a very autistic French guy called Descartes in the 17th century. It's basically alien to any other culture except Western culture. It eventually took off in America and became the leading religion of America. And any religion in America is basically a version of individualism. Now, I believe it's a bit tragic because I don't really believe in Marlboro Man. I don't think even think Marlboro Man gets laid, to be honest about it. I think it's a bit spooky. So I think this hero on his own is an idea which is deeply dysfunctional. And in a world today with the internet where everything is interconnected and we all need to be interconnected and make that work, with 8 billion people on the planet have to somehow get along, I think it pays off to start thinking what kind of forms are we actually shaped by evolutionarily. Definitely the tribe.
The informationalist paradigm.
Yes, so exactly. So now we're in the informationist paradigm, and that means tribe is always there. It's an archetype; we can't escape it. And smaller than tribe is clan, smaller than clan is family. Larger than tribe are the ones who tried to extend humanity to during civilization. They're called nation and empire. They're much more difficult to keep together because we're essentially tribal human beings. So to work from the fact that I'm very sort of pro-human. I think we should start with defining the archetypes, men, women, whatever, and define who we are. And then we define who we are. We should be nice to ourselves and basically shape technology according to our needs. And that's my philosophy.
But I see. I don't disagree from a social perspective or from a political perspective. One of the things I argue with American libertarians all the time on this side of the Atlantic is that, hey, you guys keep thinking that the fundamental aspect of a society is an individual, and then you say, well, it's really the nuclear family. Well, what about extended families? What about no human has ever existed in the forest by themselves,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's your case you're autistic like Ayn Rand. She obviously was an autist, right? That's okay. Because autists are actually happier when they live on their own with a cat in the countryside and never deal with anybody.
Sure.
But that's for them. They're like an exception. The vast majority of people, like 99.5% of people, are deeply social creatures.
I mean, I would say
I'm not a socialist.
I work. My main profession is to work with people who are developmentally disabled adults who have autism. And even if they think that they're okay living alone with their cat, they're not. They need socialization. They need friends. It's very important for their well-being as well, even if they don't recognize it, because they do exist and are sustained.
I believe you. You won the argument. I believe you. I love losing arguments. I love you for it. Here we go.
No. But my point is that the individual perspective, I think you're right. It's wholly not unhelpful when we talk about societies, communities, and groups.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that word does have meaning when we sit introspect in ourselves. When you're taking a shit by yourself in the middle of the night, there is this individual, right? And I was gonna say, like, I was watching Shogun, the new big FX show about Japanese feudal society. And they talked about this notion of how a man has 3 different hearts. And one of those hearts is private, doesn't talk. It's his own ideas. He doesn't share with the world. His ideas about himself that are just his. Does the word individual is useful within that context?
You just said 3 hearts. You just described individual. You just described a person consisting of many different things. So, for example,
correct.
I wrote my first book 24 years ago, and people come up to me and said, "Aren't you going to rewrite the book, redefine anything? Although it's a classic." But I'm just like, no, because the person who wrote that book was the person who I was then, not the person I am now. And gladly, I can even oppose those ideas I had then, and I might even be wrong. I might have been right back then. I don't care. I can gladly write a new book and say, by the way, I was wrong 24 years ago. This is the way it works. For example, autists do not like to live alone with cats. I was just convinced by a friend. I've changed my mind completely. The old Alexander Bard thought the autist with the cat was the norm. And the new Alexander Bard has been convinced that no, autists are actually more social than that. So the trick is actually by being individual, I can be different from one day to the next. I can also be different tomorrow, and there's no prestige involved. And I am. The trick with the individualism is that I am many people at the same time living in the same body. I mean, I'm like a fucking house. It's like a musical, like La Boheme or something, or Rent or whatever. There's loads of different weird people living in a house, and they have to get along. And my sense of subjectivity is basically just the latest board meeting of these arguing people deciding that I'm going to go out tonight and have dinner or have a conversation with the Pangburn guys. This. Once you realize that this is how we actually function, which is, of course, modern cognitive science, Thomas Metzinger, John Vervaeke, all these guys do this work. Then I'm just saying, why don't you just stop using individual for 24 hours and use the word individual? And it makes perfect sense. And it is a strong and it's valid, has all the integrity that individual, but without the loneliness. Because you're not lonely. That's the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you talked about yourself as changing from the past to the future. And one thing that I liked in your in your book that you talked about this idea of having to develop stories, and the new informationalist paradigm is going to need to define themselves. Well, so my
Yes.
question to you, what do you think will be the story we're going to tell about ourselves in the future about this age? How do you exactly do you see
Oh,
this?
okay, it's called narratology. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, I'm a huge fan of Hegel for method and then of Nietzsche for heart, right? The great 19th century philosophers of Europe. I work with their traditions. But Hegel, what was brilliant with Hegel was that he completely redefined how we think ontology, epistemology, and phenomenology. And basically, he just made them into one thing. So we can afford to say that several philosophical disciplines are now merged into smaller entities. There's
Agreed.
metaphysics that's separate from all the others
Yeah.
because metaphysics is the ultimate horizon period. They've got ethics, for example, values, and ontology epistemology united by Hegel basically said you can throw phenomenology into it as well and so on. So we actually have the advantage now in the 21st century to invent maybe one or two more philosophical categories. All this work that was done in the 20th century, for good or bad, was basically called deconstruction. People were
Yeah.
sitting in these universities deconstructing history and deconstructing text and redefining things and discover slavery wasn't that nice or whatever. But they never really thought of it as its own philosophical discipline. Basically, I think that narratology deserves to be a philosophy. Narratology is the philosophical discipline about human narratives. Because human beings are creatures who tell stories about themselves and others. And we need to make a distinction between the logos, which is the factual truth, the factual narrative, the pathos, which is the emotional, over down, we're emotional creatures. AI is not, we are. Pathos, and the mythos, which unites the other two, which is basically trying to tell the story with a certain emotion in it, and you sort of compromise on the truth because you got to commit to something stronger and deeper than just mere factual truth, like Shakespeare's mythos, for example. So these are the stories human beings tell about themselves. And what's great with it is you got a triad, three different types of narratives. And whenever you get a triad in philosophy, a dialectical process starts.
Yeah.
That's what dialectics is, and that's what Hegel
Yeah.
says. And then you discover that
And
okay,
the
that was one
synthesis
way.
between the triads, right?
Exactly. They can move on into new triads, but you got to
Yeah.
try to start from. So you can sit down with anybody and say, what kind of stories do we tell? Here's the funny thing. Once we started doing narratology, started with the logos, the mythos, and the pathos, we discovered that in contemporary brain science, you increasingly talk about three different types of brains. One brain is the rational brain, one brain is the emotional brain, and one brain is the mimetic brain, the social brain. Because human beings are social creatures, so we have to spend a lot of brain power on being social. The funny thing is, this fits perfectly with the three narratologies. So we can say, okay, this is a strengthening of philosophical argument. Okay, if we actually, even as human beings, have three different brains, it turns out even the logos and the pathos are stronger in men, where the mythos is weak, whereas the mythos is stronger in women, where the logos and pathos are weaker. And the gay guys and lesbians the other way around, which is amazing. You've proven you can use it. You can take it to a psychologist. You can take it to psychoanalysis because then it works in philosophy. And we can then start to deconstruct storytelling properly and stop mistaking one story for another. So all this postmodernist bullshit about all stories are relative and equally valued. We're saying, no, they're not. They're three different types of narratives and don't mistake one for the other. Just
Mm.
start there. They're all irreducible to one another, so keep them separate.
So, like, no
That's it.
narrative absolutionism kind of thing.
Exactly. So narratology says there is factual truth about reality. All of history is now a factual truth, cannot be changed. Whatever happened, happened. Whatever happened, happened is then referred to the logos.
Mm.
Okay, the mythos is here now. Right here and now, we don't know what's going to happen. We have freedom towards the future. We have agency and we commit to things and they will influence who we become in that process. But we don't have any freedom about the past. That we have to accept radically. Both Hegel and Nietzsche said you have to accept the past radically. But right now, where you're acting, you have agency, but you don't really know what you're doing. You have a feeling for it, an intuition for it. It's a mythical state. And then when you look into the future and you start dreaming about where are we going to go? What's the vision? Where am I going to be in 30 years' time? Your pathos comes into the picture. You're totally emotionally engaged and you're being pulled into the future towards the goals you set up for yourself. So the
Mm.
narratology also makes sense along the timeline. There you go.
Mm.
That's when all of these things come together and start make sense as a larger picture. That's when you succeed in philosophy. You know you get a really good argument, which is going to be really helpful for people to think clearly.
Is narratology getting any headway?
Oh yeah, exactly. It is already. So because it fits in with so many models already. I work, for example, with psychologists in America, so this makes perfect sense. We know
Yeah.
about the three brains. We can now start doing cognitive science from a individual
Well, you
perspective.
can help
Human beings are
people.
different.
You can help people better self narratize themselves. You know what I mean?
Exactly, because which one of the three stories or the three brains do you need in the morning?
Right.
Which ones do you need when you go to work? Which ones do you need when you go to bed at night? Which ones do you need when you go to bed with your partner? Which ones do you need when you tell stories to your children? And people just go, wow, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, I have three brains. I should use all three stories. And by knowing which one I go into, which mode I go into, I become the individual of that kind of narrative and I can
Ah,
use it in
okay.
my everyday life.
Okay, so which story do we tell ourselves from a social perspective about like, so you wrote here, it's time not only to go back to history, but to rewrite history as though it had a new Hegelian necessity. And the new
Yes,
necessity to which is the root of the phallus points the informationalist paradigm.
exactly. So I gave an example. You've heard about the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and the Iron Age.
Yes.
Do you think Stone Age people were aware they lived during the Stone
No.
Age?
No.
Exactly. So you can now Google that. That's great. So you can Google that and check the etymology. Who used the word Stone Age first? Some German in the 1850s. By the way, it's probably the same guy who invented the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Why were they invented in the 1850s? Because everybody's building huge factories. And the factory owners were wealthy and they were taking over the world. So, if you want to get paid as an historian, you would write a story that says that everything of human history was all about one day building the factory. Therefore, we tamed physical materials and that's civilization, and you get a story. Now, we still teach our kids that at school, but obviously it doesn't make any sense any longer because the kids have smartphones in their hands and they live in an information society. And then what we're doing in our work is that, okay, let's do what the German did in the 1850s because that was clever. You basically read out all of history up until now as if every society was a proto-information society. Then you
Leading up to
suddenly,
that point, inevitably.
yeah, exactly. So exactly, it looks inevitable
Yeah.
always in hindsight. So
So it's
Hegel
so
says that everything looks necessary in hindsight, but actually, when you start looking at the future, it's not necessary; it's contingent. But it looks necessary in hindsight. That's the strength of storytelling about the past. So we need a mythos that says that why are we here today? That's always where philosophy should be looking. Why are we here today? What are we about? Always say, well, okay, we started talking. Animals don't talk, for good or bad, and we started writing. Then we started printing, and then we started mass duplicating printing through electronics and eventually got the internet. Okay, four paradigms, human history, cutting to four paradigms, each
okay,
one
that's what you're
with a
saying.
huge explosion in data being accumulated and processed, meaning a
Yeah.
whole new power structure takes over the
Yeah.
world. And that's why the internet age right now that we just
Yeah.
started. Would you ask us what we're doing today, looked about the future, we will look incredibly confused at the beginning of a new paradigm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying that the best way to tell the story about ourselves is to tell it from the paradigm of information as opposed
Yes.
to from the paradigm of raw materials.
Or
Yeah, exactly.
industrialization.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And
Why
then we arrive here. Then we
eh,
arrive here, which is the
do
point.
you think this is a tangential question, because while I was reading through it, I thought to myself, I kind of had a thing of Rousseau who talked about civil religions, because you're talking about technological religions, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about what kind of religion could we have today that's credible. So, and I'm not a dogmatist at all. I think religion. I'm a Zoroastrian myself. I practice
Yeah.
Buddhism. I'm going. I just enjoy having that meditation every morning. It's just part of my life. It's just a given thing. But it's really about religion that I can believe in. I don't believe Jordan Peterson's stance is acceptable when he says that I don't think God exists, but I live to the God exists, because then he's just a hypocrite. Nobody believes
Correct.
he actually means that. He wants to save his Baptist church fans or whatever. I don't care. But it's like junior high school wrong. It's just like, no, actually, you will you will at times of trouble act according to your beliefs. You will not act according to beliefs you should have, but you don't have. You will act according to beliefs, and that's the only way you can build a credible platform with other people who then believe in you because you're honest about your beliefs, right? So I want help people to do religion today that they can believe in. Religion is always there. We started the book Synthesis saying that everything is religion, and precisely that which pretends it's not religion is what's dangerous. Anything that admits it's religious, fine. So, religare, what connects us with other human beings today, what would that be? Well, I think it has to be credible. And actually, if you look at the history of religion from the perspective of the information society, you know, women give birth to children fundamentally. Men could be said to envy women for giving birth to children because men do everything for women when women give birth to children. Like they protect and provide everything because mother giving birth to children is like biggest thing ever. So what men do, they envy that. So men have therefore given birth to technology, which is entirely masculine enterprise the last 5,000 years. So since every child born is basically like the last child born, it's a repetition of the same. Basically, our brains are not bigger than they were 5,000 years ago. If anything, they're probably smaller. And our smartphones got bigger, meaning that technology develops over time and biology hasn't. So it's only a question of time before technology overtakes biology in this sense.
That's true. I
And
will
in
say
this
that
sense,
one
it this
thing.
doesn't make sense to start rethinking religion like the relationship between human beings and technology.
Oh yeah.
And then suddenly people in Silicon Valley wake up and say, what the fuck? This guy, Bard guy, is he saying we're doing something religious? And then I go to Burning Man and said, hey, it's obvious. Burning Man is a deeply religious exercise. It's fucking American communism for 8 days. That's pretty religious to me. Oh, they go, yeah, that's true. And that's where you came up with ideas like Twitter, right? So it's an integral part of Silicon Valley culture that you already do religious practices, not just your girlfriend's going to Tulum instead of meditating. Your religion, human beings always construct new religion through their practices and rituals. And the
Hmm.
point is to say that actually opening up theology and taking back theology big time, saying we can do synth theology, we can do theology as the relationship between human beings and technology, where technology is a God who does not yet exist but could come.
Okay.
So an
That's an
atheist
interesting way to
suddenly
look
can
at
believe
it.
in God. He's just put God in the future. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting about what you said biology over time and technology is gonna, our brains might be smaller. My intuition tells me that that might be that the opposite might be true, right? We have higher access to food. We're growing taller. We have more time to study. We're not as preoccupied with living in the fields, especially in developed countries, and therefore, I think that if anything, our brains have more nutrients to develop. Our
Well,
Yes,
that's
less.
actually
and
not
remember, it's
true.
not about
It's
the
not.
size. I'm
No,
sorry to interrupt. My
yeah,
apologies.
that's happened with human settlement and farming that we got a lot shorter, died quicker. But actually, we were taller and healthier when we're semi-nomadic. So we're probably going to finish up with looking a bit like we did 15,000 years ago. Then again, our brains
Hmm.
are certainly not bigger. But here's the point: I don't care. I'm a
Okay.
big fan of technology and biology. I don't do artificial intelligence. I do symbiotic intelligence. Symbiotic intelligence, the optimal collaboration between human beings and AI, or the optimal collaboration between human beings and machines. I love gadgets and machines. I think the 19-year-old girls around you these days who think their smartphone has become a body part, I think they're right. I don't mind because we do change with history and our relationship to technology changes us more than anything else. And why
Technology is
not?
advancing so much faster than us. You may be right about, like, the brain getting smaller and all that kind. The one thing I did want to point out though is that the brain size is not so much important as it is the folds and the cortex. So I'm sure
And
that people,
collaboration with others.
yeah,
The
Yeah.
and
Neanderthals had
collaboration
bigger
with
brains, but the
others.
Tramps are
Yeah,
smaller. We beat the shit out of them. There you
yeah.
go.
No, I agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So
So
how does this tie into when you talk about that only through the phallus worship of the approaching eventology can humanity start to dream of an end of returning to the hell of the lynch mobs? Because I think
yeah,
there's a connection here.
yeah. Okay. So the fundamental story and the fundamental religion we call nomadology. Nomadology is the religion practiced by nomads. So if you imagine that we were nomadic and had to be nomadic to survive and had to move constantly because if we didn't move, we die, that must have been the first story told. The first story must have been you must get up tomorrow morning, start moving again because otherwise you're dead. So a nomadology is then repeated in history, comes back again and again, and we call it an exodology, which returns later in history once civilization is established, because the Exodus, for example, the Hebrews walking out of Egypt, is the perfect example of a nomadic tribe getting started again to move somewhere else. Pilgrimage, for example, or migration. America's full of people who immigrated the last 300-400 years, and basically you set up the European paradise, and it's called the United States. So you migrate, exodology. But originally, the nomadology could not even consider that you could be permanently settled. And if you think about that, that must be the original religion. It certainly is a repetition of the same constantly. Like every season is the same season, every new day is the same day, every year is the same year. Everybody dead is just being reborn as a new child because everything returns and returns and returns forever the same way. Nobody could even have imagined that something could happen that changed history forever. The first time we can record somebody actually thought that something can happen that changes history forever is the birth of Zoroastrianism, the first monotheistic religion in Persia, 1700 before Christ. At least by then, about 4,000 years ago, people had started to kind of figure out that something could happen that radically changed things. And from then on, life would be very different for human beings. For example, why don't we settle somewhere and just farm and see if that works? And that already happened, obviously. So people realized that, oh, okay, so human beings are capable through their minds and the accumulation of information, they're capable of actually changing history forever. We needed written language to even think that. We started writing long before this happened. It couldn't have been thought by somebody who just spoke. But by writing, we could imagine this. History can be changed forever. This is why the title of the book is Process and Event. The process is the fundamental religion, everything returns to the same tradition. Event says that no, something can happen for good or bad that changes history forever.
Okay.
So I give you an example. There's so many of them in history, but like August the 6th, 1945, Hiroshima. After that's obvious to everybody, history's changed forever. There are now atomic bombs that are part of the picture, and we can blow ourselves up. Unthought before that day suddenly is thought by everybody. So these are events in history. And I'm a big defender of eventology because I don't have to do what has to be repeated endlessly because that's been done. It's called Hinduism, by the way. So what I'm interested in philosophy is I'm interested in imagining what could happen that hasn't happened. What could be totally unexpected? What could be terrible if it happened? And what could be absolutely beautiful if it happened? And
Mhm.
how could make the beautiful happen and avoid the terrible from happening? That's what philosophers should deal with, and we call that eventology.
And so why do you ground it in the sociant? Why do you ground it in like the what you say is the original tribe?
Because we work with paleontologists, and this is the great thing about being alive today. There were no social sciences before, they were all hoaxes. Now they suddenly are because we got data. Okay, so human behavior can be measured, and we are now discovering like huge ruins and older civilizations because we get satellite pictures and we see patterns that clearly are evidence that humans have been around, and we discover Göbekli Tepe and shit like that. So that's great. So what happens is you can do data anthropology. You can finally do data. You can use data and you can improve and test things. This is why paleontology is so interesting because basically it was dead science. Nobody cared. You dug up an occasional dinosaur in Patagonia and that was it. Suddenly, paleontologists can actually now start looking at the data and have discovered that there's a period about 150,000 years with a couple of ice ages thrown in between before the last 15,000 years when civilization kicks in. There's a period, a long, long, long period where virtually nothing happens. Human beings are the same. They're at their smallest number only a couple of thousand, and at their highest number they go up to about 3 million. But they're
Yep.
somewhere between a few thousand and maximum 3 million. They're all nomadic and nothing happens. That's great because then we can solidify that nomadology is the original religion. It's the original religion of all these people 150,000 years. And this, of course, the period when our genetic makeup is shaped. We are all children of these 150,000 years. And the word used in paleontology for this period is the sociote, like the original social construction. And it turns out the Dunbar number is actually the clan size. The size of the tribe or the social itself is somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 people, depending on whether you count the dead or not. But it's somewhere around 1,200, 1,500. And we turns out in contemporary data, that's about as many people you can remember the names of face off before you start dropping people off your radar. It's a universal format. It works. That's why Facebook has
Mhm.
no more than 5,000 friends because you don't have 5,000 friends. You don't know
Yeah,
5,000 people.
I think the
And
humans can
it's so
have like
solid.
what?
Yeah, it's so solid now, proven anthropology, that we can claim this philosophically. Why don't we work understanding human beings as social animals from the sociote? And then we can say smaller units like family and clan should always be thought first because they come naturally to people. As long as you go up to tribal size, no crime has been recorded. You don't have crime in tribes. You have crimes when tribes meet and somebody from another tribe disloyal to a tribe enters your tribe and then crime occurs. You break the rules. And this is why, ever since civilization started, philosophers and historians have dealt with the question, how do we create something bigger than tribe and keep it together without falling into instant warfare? It's the deepest religious question of all. How do we keep the people of Euphrates and Tigris from not killing each other constantly?
So
That's
you're not
religion.
you're not giving up on Hobbes's or Rousseau's attempt to try to understand like the development of human societies. You're simply saying I have the answer, and the answer is associant.
You said a name I love, Hobbes. You said a name I hate, Rousseau, in the same sentence.
Hmm.
I mean, we killed Rousseau in our work. I don't know whatever he did that. I mean, woke culture today is Rousseau. It's just like tabula rasa. No, we're not born tabula rasa. We're born with the gene plaques. We're born
Of
incredibly
course.
pre-programmed, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with Hobbes though, in the sense that Hobbes is fun because he's so fucking dark that he really looks at you and he's like, oh, what are we gonna do with them? They're just stupid idiots anyway, or something like that. And Hobbes is good at that, and it's a really refreshing read to return to Hobbes occasionally. My co-writer on Sonic is an absolute expert on Hobbes. I'm not, but I'm with Hobbes, but not Rousseau.
Okay, I wasn't saying necessarily the agreement, but almost like the attempt to say like Hobbes goes, okay, well let's hypothetically go back and look at human development, right? He has this idea of the man in nature, what it would look like, and he tries to build notions of society, how we should organize politically to maintain to work. And he does this hypothetical story where he tells a story, a narrative about development of human beings
Yeah, but
through.
he starts like Mesopotamia about like it's like cities and towns and countryside are guaranteed as a beginning, and it does a kind of history of civilization itself. We
Yeah,
try to be pre-civilizational because we can do that now, and he
I mean,
couldn't.
yeah,
Yeah,
Hobbes tried, right? He had this idea of like the man in nature walking around brutish, angry, and he had this. Rousseau also had a similar story, right, where he talked about how the hammer was originally a luxury and then eventually became a necessity. Kind of has this technological understanding of the development of society, but you're not breaking away from that uh,
well, they're
tradition.
doing it. They're doing individuals. They're doing the brute on his own, etc. The only people who live outside of tribes are shamanoid characters in our work. What we discovered is that about 4% of all people actually are outcasts and do okay in the wilderness on their own, both men and women. And we call them shamanoid characters. Rock stars are shamanoid. You know, you start seeing the shamanoids once you get to learn the term, but they're the exception from the rule. There's another 4% that we call LGBT, which are androgynous people. There's another androgynous caste. So totally, there's about 8% of people who are deviations from the norm, 92% of any population of regular Joes and Joes. So that is the repeated pattern. Obviously, it's older, it's sociontic, it's older than civilization itself. So it's just a repetitive pattern that comes back into any population you look at. You go back to that form. The shamanoid can live outside the community, but any brute you find in the wilderness would be shamanoid. It wouldn't be the guy. It wouldn't be Joe. It wouldn't be the guy you're trying to measure here. He's definitely tribal. He lives inside the tribe. He's bred inside the tribe. He grows up there. He's cut short by the elders as he grows up, does his rite of passage, and hopefully gets to sleep with a woman and have kids. And then he goes out and becomes a warrior or a hunter. That's the vast majority of men, for example.
Do you think
So they're
there's a
brutes.
story where we don't simply understand humans as tribal or individuals or communal or as part of societies? Is there a model or a perspective that takes into account all of these different forms?
Well, we call it archetypology. Jung was sloppy doing archetypes, but he was right to do it. So just like Nietzsche, who's a very unfinished philosopher, you can work with Jung, but you have to start from being very unfinished. We call it archetypology. So your geneplex, what you're born with, is a memory bank. That's an archetype. So we can sit down and talk about who you are, and then we can discuss what's your primary archetype, which is what you do with these that impresses others, but you don't get why they're impressed because it's just a natural thing in the world for you to do. And you could then have a secondary archetype, which is what you can do with a little effort, like usually your education and your profession, but you can do it if you're educated towards it. So those are your archetypes. So we can basically, by looking at your geneplex and making, a sort of a summary about your personality type, discover what kind of person you are. And then we try to see if that archetype fits into contemporary society, which is a paradigm. And then we move from archetypology to paradigmatics. And what's great with that is that with archetypology, you can say it's the geneplex, it's all about the geneplex, what you're born with, your genetic makeup. But with paradigmatics, you can say it's a memeplex. It's about the idea. It's about the application of those genes onto contemporary society. So if you were a warrior back then, you'd be an engineer today. If you were a hunter back then, you could be a businessman today. And suddenly we discover, okay, so the same geneplex returns as a memeplex, which is the contemporary interpretation of it. And this is incredibly helpful for people to do because you get one thing which is very stable over time, which is the archetypology and its geneplex. And you go one thing, it moves very quickly over time, depending on what new ideas we have. And that's the memeplex, which is the paradigm. And that's very helpful for people to discover who they are and how they should organize society.
Hmm.
So archetypology is the word we use for what you just described.
Okay. So with the archetypology uh s- of communities, right? I'm a little confused because while I understand we have like these archetypes, what I'm trying to say is that is there room for when we construct political systems or social systems where we say, okay, at the center of it is the socium, the tribe, but we also need laws that recognize the at the center that of a person's perspective is themselves or their family. How do we organize? Is there a way? Is there room to model society or to create rules or laws that take into account more than one perspective, more than one mode in a sense where
I think so. I think so. But there's more similarity here or things in common than actually difference when it comes to these things. So I'd say you always build the village square, don't you? The village square is kind of cave like. It's a matrix, it's a womb. And next to it, you build some kind of a town hall with a tower on top of it or a church. Phallic, penis up in the sky, connected with the sky god. So these forms are so deep in us that we reconstruct them constantly in architecture. And that makes sense because you come to the town square and go, oh, here I can be with my friends and people and see who else is in this community. And maybe we should have conversations and we can have debates and things. And maybe we should just make decisions and raise our hands and accept the majority won the decision and then stay with us for this town and this town square. And the town square automatically is a town square meeting. Politics is all about the town square, the polis, a womb because we feel comfortable in the womb. You build a womb because then people feel we're all here together, we're a community together. But then you can also have, the symbol of power, which is like, what gazes from above down on you and says, like, hello there, what are you up to? Do you really live up to your promise? Do you really fulfill everything you could possibly do? Do you live according to your fullest capacity? That's the phallic gaze. And religion is always based on the sky god having that phallic gaze, looking down and all saying that, yeah, I love you, but you know what? You don't love yourself when you don't do your absolute optimal best. But if you do your optimal best, I'll applaud you. You don't get applause before that, like you do in the town square, where they applaud you just for existing. I only applaud you if you really make something really heroic. Now, these things are so deep in us, but they make perfect sense for us. It's a journey from child to grown up. It's the journey from girl to woman, from boy to man. All these journeys that we make within the archetypology rhyme with these things. And of course, they're being reborn in new, fresh versions in architecture all the time. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
yeah, I
So
do
these
find an
these
irony that
patterns, these sexual patterns are so deep. Basically, Freud was
but
right
I
about
do
that. Yeah.
find it funny that we live today in a world where we're usually looking down at our phone at the person who's telling us, like we look at the Andrew Tates or as you brought Jordan Peterson, you're looking down at them today. They're no longer above you, castigating their shame or whatever it is onto you.
No,
Um,
but because we always had the Colosseum, we had the freak show. So what Andrew Tate hasn't understood is that nobody's listening to him to take him seriously. He even has Jewish fans, despite the fact he's a member of Hamas, because if he would go to Gaza, they would just kill him. So, he's an idiot, but he's a freak show. He gets viewers because he's a freak show. So a lot of the things that they're freak shows, and they will laugh at somebody below us in the hierarchy. We are certainly trying to find voices to lead us. And we're desperately looking for leaders all the time because without the leadership, without the mentorship, none of that is going to happen to us. So, for example, I lead the men's movement here in Europe. It's especially strong in Scandinavia. My events are not only leadership events for men to train men. Older men train younger men to become men. That's the whole idea. They're totally sold out. The younger guys are desperate to find older men to impress or to find help from or support from, to become grown-up men, to become fathers, mentors, leaders, or whatever. So people are aspiring again and they're going back to find leadership. And leadership's going to come back big time. It's just that when we turn off those smartphones and we no longer look at Andrew Tate and laugh at him, we're actually responsible for our own lives, and laughing at him will not help us. Then you need leadership.
Hmm.
okay, how does this tie into the victimhood mentality, the dialectics of resentment, as you write in your other book, um, Digital Libido?
Yeah. So this is very Nietzsche. Okay. Um, you have to accept everything that happened in history until now and even love it and just as an act. It's an act of faith. Then you can look into the future and see the intense freedom that awaits you and the many possibilities you have in your life to create something really awesome, especially together with your tribe, with your friends, right? So this is start there. The only approach you can then have, if you fully accepted the past, you're heroic. You've accepted it, totally accepted it. If it turns out your perception of the past is wrong, you correct it and accept it again. You accept the past at all times. Then you cannot be resentful. When you're resentful, you start, well, things didn't go as I'd planned. If things had gone differently, I'd be a lot happier. Therefore, I would keep my mind completely preoccupied with what went wrong and why it went wrong. And I have to justify that those wrongs have to be corrected. So I will go back into history and pretend that things could have been different than they were, and they should have been declared to be different than they were, and therefore I become resentful. And this is when human beings go on their most dangerous path. Everything that's wrong with civilization starts with resentment. Allowing yourself to be resentful, number one, you become your own worst enemy, because at the end of the day, you're going to hate yourself and be bitter about yourself too. Because you are
Yeah,
the result of what
resentment
happened.
and fear. Yeah.
Yeah, because you are a consequence of what happened. You are the child of what happened. When you say that I love history up until now, you live here because you're a child of that history. So
Hmm.
you're basically saying I should not be here if you say history should have been different. Well, you are here. So you both want to be here, but you want to go back and redirect what happened in the past to your advantage. So you want compensation for things that didn't really have anything to do with you. And you want social justice. You want everything to be absolutely flat, that everybody should have the same resources. So the lazy people should have the same resources as the people who work hard. All of society would fall apart. And this cultural sentiment, although I love the Persians, but it was a Persian cult. It was the Mastakites in the 6th century who really, really started blowing this up big time. This trait was already among the Gnostics, because the Gnostics said that, oh, I hate my body and everything in the body is evil. But in my mind, I'm so fucking pure and clear, whatever. But that's the beginning of resentment, because you hate your own body and you are your own body. My philosophy is completely embodied. I don't accept that anybody says that you're not your body. You are your body. Your brain is attached to the body. Without the body, it's nothing.
Yes.
You are a complete embodied person. If you don't recognize that, get out of here, right? But the Gnostics, and leading the Gnostics, eventually Mastak arrived in the 6th century. He was incredibly popular. And he said, everybody should have the same. We should just split everything. So instead of giving everybody the same opportunity, equality in terms of opportunity, we should have equality in terms of outcome. That's madness. But from Mastak, all the way up through history, onto Pol Pot in Cambodia, we've had these terrible fucking Jacobins everywhere who go for the resentment cult, and they go to people and say, oh, you've been treated unfairly, life's been too tough on you, therefore the other guys who were successful, we have to kill them and take everything away from them and give it to
Yeah.
you, because we should give it to you because life didn't treat you well, and then we can
That's a
finally have
narratology right there.
justice. Exactly. It's this obsession with justice. I hate the word justice. Life is unfair. Learn to live with it. You know,
It is
that's
unfair.
it.
That's the truth.
So
That's
I
where Nietzsche starts.
I want to
Life
make
is
sure
unfair. Accept it. Love
I
it.
I want to make
Right?
sure people might not misunderstand you, because it's all about being charitable and good faith. You're not saying that, oh, if you're poor and currently as you're living the way things are kind of like messing with you. It's you were born into a family where you didn't have access to education, especially living in the United States, you don't have access to healthcare. That person should have the ability and be taught to get in a place where they can make money and live a I don't want to use the word just, but a
Yeah, he said
respect.
equality of opportunity.
Yeah, but I say quality. I say
But
go get
but
it.
what?
Number one, go get it. Okay.
Yeah, no.
I
But one second. But let's say
I cannot help you unless you start by helping
sure.
yourself
But let's
first.
say you have someone who's
Yeah.
trying to help themselves. That equality of opportunity, we want to make sure that people who have the opportunity can utilize that opportunity, right?
Yeah, because everybody in a tribe you do. If
So
anything,
how
we
would
just have
so how would you
extend tribal to
so how
larger
would you
and that
know
makes sense, right?
if people are actually utilizing their equality of opportunity? Wouldn't you have to look at the outcomes in a sense and say, oh well,
Oh,
there is a degree.
I give an example. I work with psychiatry. I'm a psychologist. I work with a team of psychiatrists. It's wonderful work, very hard, but very
I
rewarding.
envy you.
The first thing, the first thing I do is to look at the patient and say, do you want to help yourself or do you want to collaborate in helping yourself? And if they said, well, not really, say, get out of here. I've got a long queue of patients coming in who are dying to see me and they want to help themselves. If you don't want to help yourself, get out of here. Get on my way. You're wasting my time. I cannot help you unless you're coming through the door and said, my life has crashed. I'd be willing to take any help I could have to fix it and give myself a less chance. I'm going to be nice to myself. Oh, you're going to be nice to yourself? Then I can be nice to you. You know what? Here's what you're lacking. Here's what you've been doing. Here's what we didn't do for you when you were 17. Now you're 34. We need to compensate for that. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can do to give you some kind of quality of life and some self-dignity. And when I'm finished with them, 19 out of 20 walk out the door 6 months later and are happier than ever. The 20th one is the one that came to the door and says, yeah, I will just want to get your attention and sit and waste your time because I don't really want to help it out because I love my drama and I love my misery and I love it too much. The resentment. The resentment is always somebody who pretends they want your help, but they don't. All they want is revenge. They don't want to get the education. They don't want to do the effort it takes to get the education. If you'd given them the school and said, you should go and get educated, they would have turned it down because they, no, I don't need education because I'm so fucking fantastic. I don't need to get educated. Well, okay, you get fucking Greta Thunberg, you know.
Yeah, that's narcissism right there.
Narcissism, right? Narcissism is tied to resentment. Exactly. They're totally tied to each other.
So what is the way you're understanding when it becomes resentment is when there's this idea of I want to fix history. I want to currently go back with whatever actions I can and redo what has been wronged in history when I didn't exist, instead of focusing on what I can make, instead of focusing on
it's even more violent than that, because what they always do, the resentful people always do, they do not want to go back and fix history and now have the problem fixed. No. They want to milk history for being wrong. They always want eternally to push the button that gives them more breast milk. The resentful people always long back to the mamilla. They always long back to a fantastic paradise where they could just suck a tit whenever they wanted to. It was there magically for free, and they could have whatever they wanted whenever they wanted it. That's why every damn alcoholic you meet and every man drug addict you meet are always resentful. The first you need to get out of the head to get them out of the addiction is to make them understand you're bored as hell with the resentment. You don't accept it all. You're bored with it. And you have to make them bored with it until they finally just give up and stop taking drugs, stop drinking, because they're totally not motivated any longer, because they're just bored to death with themselves. And that's when they hit rock bottom, and you can start rebuilding. So you got to get out of the resentment is the poison constantly with people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Resentment is the main poison that is holding society back from achieving its actual goals.
And that's why it's a problem in a decadent society. We've had peace now since 1945, more or less. We're very affluent. We've created technologies that make us all wealthier. We have welfare states. We pay the taxes gladly because we're all doing okay. Healthcare is getting better. Cancer is not the death any longer. We are getting better. We're getting better. The problem with all this affluence we had in the last 60 years, with affluence historically comes more and more decadence, and decadence is resentment. So the cultures of resentment have exploded in the last 20, 30 years. From people who do not want to make an effort to improve anything in their lives. They just want to be given the fucking breast milk. That's what we have.
Do you agree with Nietzsche's analysis when he says that Rome, and one of the issues that it faced was this quote unquote resentment brought on by the distinction with the slaves and the noble, where they said I can't do, therefore it's wrong to do so. Do you think that if you use this understanding of resentment, that would fits as well into that paradigm of the failure in Rome?
Yeah, to me, I don't know about you guys, but Christianity and Islam promise you the afterlife, and they also said the poorest guy goes first into heaven. I think it's the biggest lie ever. So what I've done in my work is, if Nietzsche went after Christianity big time and basically deconstructed it, I've gone after Islam big time and deconstructed, as Nietzsche would have done if given the chance. Because I'm a Zoroastrian. I'm with the Zoroastrians of the Jews. The Zoroastrians of the Jews are the only really successful formulas for religion the West ever invented. Christianity and Islam were both slave religions. They fitted the feudal society perfectly. They no longer work today. Sorry, they're over. They need complete reformation if they're going to be around, to be honest about it.
We're really at the end of the show, and there's a question from one of our watchers.
No, not the end of the show. I love this so much, guys.
This is fun as hell.
You can come back on any time. We're welcome to have you.
I love Pangburn. I love you guys. I think that's perfect.
So my question is, arguably, can resentment be curbed through exposure to the right opportunity?
Yes. So when I am a psychoanalyst, I work technically very coldly with the analysand. We have an equal relationship. We're equals, but the theme is the analysand, not me. Okay, that's how psychoanalysis work. It's not a patient. It's a perfectly same person, but that person is the theme of the conversation. And when we get to the points where resentment has been festered, I basically make sure that this is the point where it gets really, really boring and tedious for the person to tell the story. So there's no enthusiasm left in this person retelling the story about themselves as a victim. Rather, they start hearing how boring and dull this really is. And then they give up. And a few sessions later, they come back and they're like, Joyous, life's gotten a lot easier. The coffee in the morning tasted better. I don't know what happened. I go to work and I quite like it. I stayed more than 8 hours today. I didn't leave. I stayed 10 hours. I'm even flirting with the girl at the coffee machine. What the fuck's happening? But I'm not saying what happened, but there's been a big load of boredom with you and tediousness here. That's just gone because you got tired of it. So you don't retell the story about yourself. Once people realize that if they stop telling this tedious, resentful story about themselves and start telling a heroic story, everyday life heroic story, their lives
with
get so much easier.
with all the study I've done in psychology and with the psychotherapy I've had myself, everyone from certain theoretical orientations, where they come from. Uh, I was when they first took me in. My first psychotherapist was like, "You need a self narrative. Have you hit rock bottom? Are you on the hero's journey? Are you all of these things like that?" So that is a big thing to note, is that a lot of psychology, a lot of psychiatrists are going to go down that route with you.
Yes,
Yeah,
Self-narrative.
perfect.
Yeah.
This is applied narratology. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And I
but I would
can do
also
it in
say
psychoanalysis and it works, right?
I know
Yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari talks a lot about narrativization throughout history with story of I mean, he released a whole book about Sapiens, the story of mankind. Is everyone attempting, Alex, to create this story and make other people see the world through the story?
I think that what happened was that in the 19th century, we did metaphysics and dialectics properly, and we set philosophy up for a golden age. Basically, the West caught up with East. I'm a big fan of Eastern philosophy. The West did catch up.
I am too.
Hegel and Nietzsche are amazing. And the American pragmatists, Charles Sanders Peirce, William James,
Oh, we love
amazing
those guys.
philosophers.
Love.
Whitehead,
I,
amazing.
I
So,
tell other my self narrative. I tell people
yeah.
I'm a pragmatist. That's my self narrative. I
It's a
do tell
great,
them.
it's a great way of doing philosophy. Fantastic.
It
Peirce was
is.
the,
It
Peirce was
is.
the American ego. But here's the thing: that was done in the 19th century, and we get to the 20th century when actually Europe collapses into two world wars, and suddenly we discover there's a global world, and we discover that other cultures are on this planet too, and finally we discovered the internet came along and told us, and by the way, you're ruining the planet. Climate change is happening. So it's like, okay, we got to get some kind of global order here, and we don't want a fucking global police state. How do we solve that? This is the major philosophical question today.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe in decentralization.
And you think solving
But
resentment
I,
issue?
but that's the question right
Can you
now.
say that
Yeah.
again? What is it we are looking for? What a global order and
But there has to be some kind of global order. A minimal global order to actually just fix the planet, so we can actually
without having a police state.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the trick.
Yeah.
Because the
And
Chinese want the police state, and then they sold it. We say,
so
no,
that
we don't want your model. We don't want
okay,
that
so
model.
that's like in the same way that Descartes were trying to fix the problem between Protestants and Catholics, and
Yeah.
the question you say philosophers are contending with today is how do we have a global
So
order
the
without having a
Chinese, the
police?
Chinese deny narratology. We say it's incredibly powerful, and then we look at the U.S. Constitution. We say, hey, wait a second. The logos, the Congress, the pathos, the president, the Supreme Court. Well, she's a bitch. She's holding the other two responsible for doing the promise. Mythos. So you have the narratology in anything. We look at Western culture, anything that really works well, and that we intend to say or have a new digital version of. All those things, like monasteries prior to universities. Okay, if university is done over AI comes into the picture, maybe taking back the monastery could be a good idea. I'm working with that here in Scandinavia, building monasteries. So people can go somewhere, isolate themselves, and study and go really deep on things, and they love it. So there's so many things, there's so many forms out there that were evolutionary shaped, are called Darwinian forms, not play, Darwinian forms, that we can play into our archetypology, understand how we function, and then we can just apply them and make digital contemporary versions of them, and it all makes sense. It's the easiest thing in the world for people
Yeah.
to dig into. And the fundamental values in all of this just make sure everybody gets a chance to say heroic and cut people short when they go into resentful mode.
Would,
That's
would
all ethics needs.
would you say a good thing to take away from this entire conversation is we need to find a way to cure resentment?
Yes, and split power in several different functions.
Okay.
Split power at all times.
Okay.
Because we don't want the police state, and that's exactly why, you know, I'm a big fan of Balaji Srinivasan. I work with city states, network states, and charter cities, and all kinds of projects out there that just tries to stay away from this idea of the big empire coming. That I think could be really valuable as well. I think those two things I'd say is
Yeah,
takeaways. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, Alexander Bard, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people find you? What are you working on now?
I'm on Facebook, the old medium. You know what? I'll tell you. I'm at Bardissimo, Bardissimo at Protonmail or Gmail, preferably Gmail. So Bardissimo at gmail.com. Drop me an email. I mean, if you're Pangburn fans, you can have direct access to me. And what I would love to do, if you're interested in philosophy and arts right now, I would invite you to come to the intellectual deep web. It's the most happening place online today. It's just fantastic. It's doing all kinds of weird shit and burner culture and everything. So if you contact me at participant@gmail.com and you're interested in philosophy and arts and you're a Pangburn fan, I can throw you into the intellectual deep web and you'd find it really fantastic.
Thank you, Alex, for coming on. Again, most of the topics we discussed was in this book, Process and Event, and Digital Libido. So if you're interested, find those online. They're good. They're interesting. Thank you so much for coming on, and we
Big
I
appreciate you.
love,
loved it,
huge
man. I
Pangburn
loved it.
fan.
I
Speak
loved
soon.
it.
Okay, big love. Big love.
Big love. That was a good
All right.
conversation. He
That
was
was
he
excellent.
was out there. That coffee really hit him.
Yeah, that was excellent. He was having a good time, and I was too. Can you delineate archetypology a little bit for me in the audience?
I think when he was talking about archetypology, he was talking about the obviously the study of archetypes, archetypology, the
Right, I
study of
got that.
archetypes.
I got that part.
And he was just saying that there's these different like um I call them heuristics or uh notions of like there is the fighter, like for example. He
Right,
thinks the way Jung did it was poorly, but he said that instead of looking at two specific, like Jung did and trying to like categorize them, we can say, hey, what the same type of person or attitudes or temperance, biological temperance that made someone a good hunter might today make them a good doctor. He's saying
right,
that's kind of what he
right.
was talking about.
Yeah, archetypology. Okay, I
Yep.
got it now.
Okay.
Word.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for the conversation. I will edit it and post it as a full-length, good conversation video. But as always, I will see you on Tuesdays if I'm live streamings. And Sunday, I'm doing a show on Pangburn. Thomas's show is on Saturday.
Yes, we will probably have one tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I'll try to jump on. I always end. I think I should have time this weekend. And I go, everyone, thank you so much. And as always, stay thinking.